On the day of the hearing, when I sat in that cold room of the family court in Dallas, I already knew that something was about to explode. It wasn't the first time I'd faced a high-pressure situation. 30 years of working between oil rigs in Alaska and the Gulf off Mexico had taught me to recognize when a person is about to use an indictment as a weapon. But nothing prepared me for the moment when my wife, 15 years younger than me, stood up in front of our family and said, in a trembling voice that she could imitate better than any actress, "He's dangerous. I need custody alone." The word dangerous hit the room like a siren, and for a few seconds everyone looked at me as if I were a man about to lose control. I was silent, but inside me something screamed. It wasn't anger. It was the weight of knowing that she had just delivered the lowest blow she could have attempted. Her strategy has always been the same: to speak as if I were invisible, as if my every gesture could be used to prove the theater she put together. She knew exactly what she was doing. Her intention was simple: to demoralize me in front of everyone, paint me as a risk to our 6-year-old daughter, gain full custody, and with that, guarantee the house, the pension, and everything that was possible to uproot. But while she played the role of a frightened mother, I watched. At that moment, I stopped being a victim. I became an observer. The whole room was against me, and I felt it like a concrete slab on my back. The judge looked at her with his eyebrow raised, as if evaluating a story that seems too rehearsed. Her parents were in the front row, shaking their heads as if confirming a crime that never existed. I, sitting there with my hands clasped together, remembered every moment of the last few months. The fabricated discussions, the objects dropped on purpose, the recordings she made in secret in an attempt to provoke me. She wanted me to react, to lose my temper, to give her exactly the kind of material she could use as evidence against me. But she had a problem. I was never one to explode. Offshore, learning to stay calm is the difference between returning home or making headlines. She forgot about it. She thought I was going to act like the men she saw in television dramas, screaming, banging on the table, making it easier for her. What she didn't know was that, while she was putting together one narrative, I was putting together another. I realized that I didn't have to win by shouting. I just needed to wait for the right moment. The word dangerous echoed in the room, but I knew that in a few minutes it would all go up in smoke. I had proof. I had time. They'd agreed. I had the documents. And as she took a deep breath to continue her story, I noticed something curious. She avoided looking at me. It was not fear. It was fear of being discovered. When we live with someone for years, we learn to differentiate fear from lies. Hers was the second. I observed the details. The trembling of the hands did not match the security of the voice. The posture was that of an actress, not a desperate mother. But the rest of the room didn't notice. That was what bothered me the most. To see people who have known me for decades looking at me with the expression of someone who believes I could be capable of the worst. They didn't see her manipulation because fear always speaks louder. She knew how to use it. She knew when to shiver, when to sigh, when to put a hand on her chest as if she were protecting herself from me. I could have been annoyed. I could have stood up and said everything I knew, but that would have been exactly what she wanted. So I kept quiet. I stared at her, waiting for the next chapter of the script she had rehearsed so many times in the mirror. The only thing I thought was, keep going. Say everything. The more you talk, the greater the impact of the fall. The judge adjusted his glasses. His defender took some notes. The room was so quiet that you could even hear the air conditioning. And as she dramatized a made-up story, I remembered the exact moment I realized I needed to protect myself. The day I found the camera hidden behind a vase in the living room, pointed directly at me. That was the turning point. There I understood that I was not dealing with a hurt woman, but with someone willing to destroy everything for advantage. That's why I was calm, because while she was trying to knock me down, I'd already seen the explosion coming from afar, and unlike her, I was prepared. When she finally sat down, still wiping away tears that never fell, the judge made a brief silence that seemed to last for minutes. I knew that kind of silence. It was the same one that preceded a critical report on the platforms, a space where no one knew whether the next sentence would bring relief or explosion. As I took a deep breath, I felt again that cross look coming from her family, as if I was already condemned before I even opened my mouth. They talked as if I were invisible, and that was always the most bitter part. But sitting there, with the documents organized inside a blue folder, I knew everything was about to turn around. My story with her didn't start that way. When I met her, I was at the peak of my career, traveling between Houston, Anchorage, and New Orleans, working weeks at sea and returning home exhausted but happy. She came into my life as someone who seemed to admire my stability, my calmness, my sense of responsibility. At first, everything seemed normal. But over time, I realized that there was something deeper in her behaviors, an uncontrollable need for attention, validation, and advantage. Anything that deviated from what she wanted was treated as an attack. This, for a long time, ignored. He believed that maturity solved it. He believed that patience calmed him down. He believed that things would settle down over time. But when she got pregnant, the gear changed completely. Motherhood did not make her more empathetic. It has made its strategies more calculated. The first time I noticed this was when she started to make small teases, always when we were alone. She would push something off the table, drop a glass, and then ask me why I was so nervous. I wasn't. I answered normally, but she insisted on repeating it as if it were true. At the time, I thought it was just immaturity. Today, I know that it was narrative construction. As the months passed, she started filming everything. At first, I thought she wanted to keep memories of our daughter, until one night I noticed that she positioned the phone with the camera facing me while provoking an argument about an electricity bill that was already paid. I asked calmly why we were discussing it again, and she just smiled with that short, controlled smile, the same one she wore in court. There I understood that nothing that was happening was spontaneous. When she finally filed for separation, she made sure to look like the perfect victim. I told the family that I was stressed, dangerous, unstable. He said that I threatened without threatening. She said she was afraid of me when in fact she was never afraid at all. What she had was in a hurry. They wanted to hurry. I had time, and it was at that time that I started to record everything. I put cameras with continuous recording. I kept complete audios. I gathered screenshots, conversations, and even her attempts to tease me while smiling, believing that I would not notice anything. I didn't have to outsmart her. He just had to be patient in court. As I remembered all this, I felt something inside me change. It was not revolt. It was clarity. I realized that I didn't have to win by shouting. I just needed to continue being who I had always been. Calm, objective, firm. The judge asked if I wanted to respond to the charges, but I asked only to wait a few minutes until my lawyer arrived, with the drive containing all the files. I knew that this would be the moment when Thetables would turn. Her family members whispered to each other, and I could hear a few loose words. He's always been strange. She wouldn't lie about that. Poor thing, look at her fear. Hearing that didn't hurt because of the words, but because of the conviction with which they were spoken. As if 15 years of coexistence were disposable. As if my whole life could be reduced to her script. But I was prepared, and that made all the difference. While we waited, she moved her hands uneasily. Each time the judge mentioned evidence, her face lost color. It wasn't anxiety, it was calculation failing. She knew she'd prepared cut videos, edited audios, carefully constructed accusations, but she didn't know that I had everything that came before the cuts, everything she didn't imagine I would see. And when we have the whole truth, we don't have to run. We just wait. I looked at her only once in that interval. She looked away immediately, and that's when I understood. She already knew she had lost. Not because of the judge, not because of my defense, but because for the first time, she no longer had control of the narrative. My greatest defense was not the documents. It was the fact that she had hidden so much inside the theater itself that she forgot that I was also watching. My revenge was not to fight. It was to let her lose alone. From that moment on, I just had to wait for the judge to see what I had seen for months. And he would see it. It was inevitable. The truth always comes out when someone relies too much on their own lie. When the lawyer finally entered the room with the silver drive in his hand, I felt as if a door had been unlocked after months of locking from the inside. He walked straight to the table, nodded to the referee, and placed the device next to the side monitor. I didn't say anything. He didn't need to. My wife's expression changed immediately, as if someone had erased her confidence with a switch. She sat back in her chair, crossed her arms, and tried to maintain what was left of the posture she had used to accuse me. But it was too late. I could see the tension in her shoulders, her breath holding her breath, the discomfort growing by the second. It was the first time since the beginning of the separation that she didn't seem in control. And I, who spent years being accused of being cold, finally understood the advantage of keeping my head on straight. The judge asked the audio and video technician to connect the drive. Meanwhile, her lawyer whispered something hastily in her ear. She just shook her head, looking at the floor as if trying to rearrange thoughts that ran away. I watched everything in silence. They talked as if I was invisible for months, and now it was she who was trying to disappear into her own chair. It was curious to see how the truth changes a person's weight. She seemed smaller, more fragile, but not because she was innocent, but because for the first time, she no longer had any lies to lean on. The referee took a deep breath when the coach announced that he was ready. He folded his hands on the table and said, with the calmness that only judges accustomed to seeing family wars can have, "Let's analyze the material that the defense sent." My wife swallowed hard. I heard. It sounded like the sound of someone who realizes that he has run too far into his own abyss. The side screen lit up, and the first video started without warning. It was footage of our hallway, taken by the camera I installed after finding her hiding her phone behind the curtain. The video showed her pacing back and forth holding a plastic cup, talking to herself, rehearsing phrases as if she were practicing a speech. She repeated a few times. "He pushed me. He yelled at me. I'm afraid of him." But at the end she sighed, relaxed her shoulders and said quietly, "It didn't look good. I'll try again." The whole room stood still. The judge frowned. Her lawyer put his hand on her face. Her parents, who minutes before had shaken their heads in disapproval at me, now looked at the screen with the same expression as someone who discovers that he has been deceived by someone in his own family. The mask began to fall there, but the video was not over yet. Then she put the glass down, kicked it on purpose, ran behind the camera and pretended to cry. It was a cry without tears, without emotion, just a clumsy attempt to look like a victim. When she realized that no one was reacting that way in real life, she simply stopped crying and turned off the camera. The judge paused the video and took a deep breath. I kept quiet, because I didn't have to say anything. The recording spoke more than any defense I could make. The second video was even worse. It was the night she told her family that I had thrown things around the room in a fit of rage. But on the screen, she appeared entering the kitchen, picking up a small vase, looking at the camera and dropping it on the floor. Then she would walk calmly to the couch, sit and wait a few seconds before feigning fright when I walked through the door carrying the grocery bags. I didn't notice anything at the time. I was tired. I had just returned from a trip. I just wanted to take a hot shower. But now, seeing that there, it hurt to realize how much she had manipulated not only the situation, but my good faith. The room was so quiet that you could hear the scribe's pen banging against the paper. The third video was the final blow. It was an audio recording, made on an afternoon when she believed she was alone in the car. She was laughing, talking to a friend, saying that she didn't need to convince anyone anymore, that custody would be hers anyway, that judges always believe in the mother. And in the end, he added, "I just need to make him look nervous in court. He's always tired, just push a little." Her friend laughed along, and I, sitting there, felt something between anger and relief. Anger for having trusted so much. Relief for finally having the proof that dismantled everything. When the audio ended, the judge leaned back in his chair. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at her. He just closed his eyes for a few seconds, as if he had to process the level of manipulation he had just witnessed. My wife was motionless. The posture, once firm, was now that of someone who had been torn from his own fantasy. Her lawyer had nothing more to say. Her parents looked at her as if they did not recognize their own daughter. It was there, at that moment, that everything turned. It was there that the narrative she had so carefully constructed collapsed at once. I remained silent, not out of pride, but because the truth needs no explanation. I knew that this was just the beginning of her downfall, and he also knew that from that moment on, the judge would no longer see a dangerous father. She would see a man who tried to protect his daughter while being attacked inside his own house. He would see someone who did not win by shouting. He won by waiting. Sometimes the best answer is written in a notary's office, and in that room the answer was in full front of everyone. The judge opened his eyes slowly, as if ending a cycle, and asked them to pause all screens. The room was still steeped in that heavy silence, the kind of silence that is born not of doubt but of revelation. He folded his hands on the table and looked directly at my wife. There was no irritation in his eyes, no anger, There was a finding. There was the firmness of someone who has seen a lot of lies crumble in front of him, but few as detailed, as calculated, as cold as that. My wife tried to maintain her posture, but her fingers trembled, and I noticed. She breathed through her mouth as if there was no air. It was the side effect of having relied too much on his own staging. The judge then turned to me. Just a second of eye contact, but a second that gave me back something I hadn't felt since the beginning of the separation. Respect. I didn't need to explain anything. He didn't need to justify anything. The truth was there, whole, raw, uncut. He made a sign to my lawyer, and my lawyer just nodded. It was the silent way of saying, "It's done. There is no going back." Her lawyer got up, arranged the papers, tried to change the narrative. He spoke of misunderstandings, of material taken out of context, of emotional conflicts of a frayed relationship. But her voice trembled, and she knew that she was only fulfilling a technical role, not defending something possible. The judge raised his hand to interrupt and asked him to sit down. He didn't want justifications. I wanted truth. And the truth had already been shown in 3 files that destroyed 15 minutes of false accusation. Her parents were silent, their gaze fixed on the table. Minutes before, they wanted me to be taken away from my daughter. Now they didn't even know how to face the situation. It was curious to observe how one person's lie can involve so many innocent people. They believed because she knew how to act. They believed because fear convinces quickly. But when the images appeared, everything was rearranged inside their heads. I could feel it in the air. Shame, shock, confusion, and in the middle of it, a kind of silent repentance. The judge took a deep breath and said he would need a few minutes to record the preliminary conclusions. Everyone remained seated. I stared at my own hands, remembering how much I had been pressured, teased, manipulated. Remembering the nights when she called me saying she was scared, while I worked on the high seas not understanding anything. Remembering the messages she sent to family members, distorting situations that never happened. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth to be seen. And finally, she had been. My wife, still without raising her head, began to murmur to the lawyer. Her tone had completely changed. There was no more confidence. There was no more theater. It was true fear now. Fear of facing the consequences. Fear of not being able to manipulate anything anymore. She always believed that she would be protected because she was the youngest, most fragile, most convincing mother. But in that courtroom on that very day, those features ceased to be shield and became proof of how much she had used her image to destroy someone. When the judge spoke again, his voice was firmer. He said that from that moment on, any accusation against me would be considered suspect until further notice. He also said that there would be an investigation into possible false reporting and emotional manipulation involving a minor. These words made her face lose all color. She looked quickly at me as if she was expecting some reaction, but I remained motionless. I didn't need to react. I didn't have to give anything back. She had built her own hole. The judge then decreed that shared custody would be provisionally maintained with me, having priority in decisions until the complete evaluation of the case. I felt a relief that I can't describe. It was not victory, it was survival. It was like coming to the surface, after months of being submerged. She lowered her head, finally understanding that her narrative was over. When the session was closed, I stood up slowly. I didn't look at her, not out of contempt, but because there was nothing more to be said. She tried to destroy me. Buddha found that I was 10 steps ahead. And in that courtroom in front of everyone, the Lee she believed she controlled became exactly what brought down everything around her. As I walked out of that courtroom, I felt the Dallas air hit my face as if I was breathing for the first time in many months. It was strange to realize that such a long war had ended there, in a few minutes of showing evidence. But in fact, that victory had not begun that day. It started the moment I decided to stop reacting to the chaos it created and started to record every detail, every manipulation, every attempt to use me as a ladder to something that never belonged to it. I have always been a simple, direct man, used to solving problems calmly and with planning. Working for decades on platforms has taught that those who despair lose. He who observes wins. And in that courtroom, the rule applied exactly as I had imagined. As I walked to the car, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. When I turned around, I saw her father coming quickly, his face downcast. He called me by name, and his voice came out trembling, not with anger, but with shame. He said he didn't know anything, that he believed everything she told, that he never imagined that his own daughter would be able to fabricate such a cruel narrative. I listened in silence because at that moment there was no room for speech. He apologized. Sincere apologies, those that don't try to justify anything. I just put my hand on his shoulder and said I understood, because in a way, I really understood. She deceived us all. And for a long time I also believed that she was just confused, immature, lost. Today I know that it was much more than that. It was calculation. It was an advantage. It was a silent war. When he got back inside the building, I got in the car and stared at my own hands on the steering wheel. It was the same hands that held my daughter when she was born, that worked for years to give her everything she needed, that built an entire life without ever raising her voice at home. And yet, it was these hands that she tried to turn into a symbol of violence. Funny how a well-told lie can make people doubt what has always been solid. But lies have a deadline. The truth is not. I started the car and stood there for a while, thinking about everything that process had taken away from me. He took nights of sleep. He took away peace. He took away the freedom to be alone with my daughter without fear of being accused of something I never did. It took away the trust I had in the person with whom I once shared a life. But it also gave me back something important. The certainty that I didn't need to defend myself by shouting, breaking, accusing. I just needed to show it. Let the truth speak. Sometimes the best answer is written in a notary's office, and that day it was in its entirety, displayed on 3 screens for anyone who wanted to see it. I received a message from my lawyer before I left. He said that the judge would make formal recommendations to protect my relationship with my daughter until everything was completely reevaluated. That gave me a tranquility that I hadn't felt since the beginning of the separation. My daughter has always been the reason I put up with everything in silence. I knew that in the end, it was for her that I needed to be patient. It was for her that I had to endure provocations, whispers, false accusations. And seeing the way it all ended, I realized that it was worth it. I don't know what will happen to her from now on. I know there will be investigations, hearings, consequences, but that no longer belongs to me. I'm not the one who will punish her. I'm not the one who will decide anything. Her life is now in the hands of justice, the same justice she tried to manipulate. The only certainty I have is that mystery with her ended in that courtroom, a story that could have ended in destruction form if I had fallen for her game. But it didn't, because I was attentive, because I knew how to observe, because in the end, those who run too much after their own lie end up stumbling alone. When I left the parking lot and entered the road, I felt an immense weight leave my back. I didn't want revenge. He didn't want to see her humiliated. All I wanted was peace. And for the first time in a long time, I felt just that. Peace. The truth won. And I was able to move forward knowing that even when they tried to destroy me, I didn't lose who I am. And that, for me, was the real victory.